Welcome back. It's the holiday season, and while many of us are Googling cheap gifts to give our coworkers for the white elephant exchange, actual white elephants, like former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, are running scared like they're being chased by vicious inbred trophy hunters.
The House has voted to hold Mark Meadows in contempt of Congress. These charges are now headed to the Justice Department, which will decide whether to prosecute the former Trump White House Chief of Staff. This vote happened after Meadows shared thousands of documents and texts with the committee, then declined to testify.
There was a lot that he gave the committee, but at this point, he's pulled out entirely and said he's invoking the Fifth Amendment.
Meadows bailed right before his deposition to the January 6th committee, claiming executive privilege forbids him to speak, even though he just released a book in which he writes about the insurrection and his conversations with Trump. This is a perfect example of white privilege. Can you imagine if OJ wrote his book before he got off? I can imagine it, and I do a lot. By writing a book, Meadows may have inadvertently waived his executive privilege, but I'm sure it was worth it for a blockbuster that's burning up the charts as Amazon's 520th best-selling book, only a few hundred slots behind actual real classics like The Big Book of Farty Facts.
Okay, so we need to talk about what's happening with Mark Meadows, because the former Trump White House Chief of Staff, who was present for virtually every key decision and conversation during the post-election period, has completely flipped on Trump, is providing comprehensive testimony and documentation about Trump's crimes, and is causing absolute panic throughout Trump's legal team and political operation. A federal judge has issued a decisive order compelling Meadows to provide all documentary evidence in his possession and to appear for additional live testimony, and Meadows is apparently complying fully rather than resisting like so many Trump allies have done. This cooperation isn't grudging or minimal. Meadows is apparently providing detailed accounts of meetings where Trump was warned his plans were illegal and proceeded anyway, turning over text messages and emails showing Trump's knowledge and intent, handing over memos documenting the planning and coordination of various schemes, including the fake elector plot and the January 6th rally, and describing Trump's state of mind and his reactions to being told about violence at the Capitol. This comprehensive cooperation from someone who was Trump's closest White House aide, who was in the room for every important decision, who has contemporaneous documentation of what happened, is the prosecutor's dream scenario and the defense's nightmare scenario. When the person who knows everything flips and tells everything, defendants lose the ability to deny or spin events because there's an insider witness with documentation contradicting every lie. But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust headlines anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join. And if you just want to support what we're doing, join us, be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video.
Before Meadows ghosted the committee, he gave them more than 9,000 pages of records. This included texts and emails where he encouraged investigations of voter fraud, a phrase that's basically the Republican safe word. Among Mark Meadows' texts, Fox News hosts like Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham begging him to get Trump to call off the insurrection. There were even texts from Don Jr. Wow, I didn't know you could send someone a text message from a Game Boy Advance. Mark Meadows also turned over something especially scary, and like so many of life's problems, it came via Microsoft.
There's also new reporting on the PowerPoint presentation that Meadows handed over to the committee. It contained a strategy for how to overturn the 2020 election.
This 36-slide PowerPoint had this recommendation that Trump should declare a national security emergency in order to use that as a justification to return himself to the Oval Office.
Meadows' PowerPoint presentation, which made it into the White House, was filled with extreme plans to overturn the election and included a conspiracy theory that China and Venezuela had obtained control over the voting infrastructure in a majority of states. In other words, the kind of emails that shouldn't even make it past a Gmail spam filter, let alone to the chief of staff. Meadows' lawyer claims he merely received the PowerPoint by email and did nothing with it, which is the World War III version of claiming you just didn't see that invite to your sister-in-law's third baby shower. And while it's nice that Meadows likely didn't pass it on to the president, it's still terrifying that Trump supporters were able to soft pitch a coup with a Microsoft Office document.
So let's set the scene here, because understanding why Meadows flipped and what he's providing helps explain why this is creating such panic and why it represents a fundamental shift in the trajectory of Trump's legal problems. Meadows apparently flipped because he faced overwhelming evidence of his own criminal liability, because prosecutors made clear he was facing serious prison time, and because cooperation was his only path to reducing his sentence. The judge's warning that further non-compliance could trigger jail time apparently convinced Meadows that he needed to cooperate fully rather than continuing to protect Trump. That calculation, choosing self-preservation over loyalty to Trump, is the rational choice when facing decades in prison, but it's devastating for Trump because Meadows knows where all the bodies are buried, literally and figuratively. Meadows was Trump's gatekeeper. He attended every important meeting. He saw every important document. He coordinated between different parts of Trump's operation. His testimony ties together all the different schemes into one comprehensive conspiracy and shows Trump's personal direction of every aspect of it. The testimony about warning Trump about potential violence and Trump proceeding anyway is particularly devastating because it proves Trump's criminal intent regarding January 6th. If Trump had warned the crowd to be peaceful, if he'd expressed concern about violence, if he'd immediately condemned the attack, he might have viable defense that he didn't intend or foresee the violence. But Meadows' testimony shows Trump was explicitly warned, violence was likely, was told the crowd was armed and angry, and proceeded to direct them at the Capitol anyway. Then when violence erupted, Trump refused for hours to call it off, despite desperate pleas from Meadows himself, from family members, from congressional leaders. That pattern of conduct, warning, ignoring warning, inciting anyway, refusing to stop it, proves criminal intent beyond reasonable doubt. The judge finding probable cause for multiple crimes based on this testimony shows how strong the evidence is and indicates Trump will likely be convicted if this goes to trial. The wave of new subpoenas that congressional leaders have issued based on Meadows' testimony shows that Meadows isn't just helping prosecutors, he's helping congressional investigators too. Meadows apparently named dozens of people who were involved in various aspects of Trump's conspiracy, described specific meetings where plans were discussed, identified who had what information and when. Congress is using that roadmap to subpoena everyone Meadows implicated, demanding they provide documents and testimony. This creates cascade effect where one person cooperating leads to pressure on many others, some of whom will likely also cooperate rather than face prosecution, which leads to more evidence and more people being implicated. This is exactly how prosecutors dismantle complex conspiracies, flip someone high up, use their testimony to pressure everyone below them. The testimony showing Trump was told his acts were illegal is critical for proving criminal intent. Trump's likely defense strategy will be to claim he genuinely believed the election was stolen, genuinely believed his actions were legal exercises of presidential authority, genuinely didn't understand he was doing anything wrong. But Meadows' testimony destroys that defense by showing Trump was explicitly told by lawyers, by advisors, by DOJ officials that what he was planning was illegal. When your chief of staff testifies that you were told repeatedly you were breaking the law and you proceeded anyway, you can't later claim ignorance or good faith belief your conduct was legal. The jury hears testimony from your closest aide that you knew it was illegal and did it anyway, and that leads to conviction. The evidence that January 6th was deliberate planning rather than spontaneous unrest undermines Trump's potential defense that the violence was unexpected and unintended. Trump will likely try to claim he just gave a political speech and some people got out of control in ways he didn't foresee or intend. But Meadows' testimony apparently shows planning for January 6th was extensive, that Trump was coordinating with rally organizers about messaging in crowds, that there were discussions about using the chaos to prevent certification of Biden's victory. When prosecutors can show deliberate planning rather than spontaneous events, it's much harder for defendants to claim they didn't intend the foreseeable consequences of their planned actions. The collapse of every pillar of Trump's defense that legal analysts describe reflects understanding that Meadows' testimony systematically addresses and destroys each potential defense Trump might raise. Defense that Trump believed election was stolen. Meadows testifies Trump was told he lost. Defense that Trump thought his actions were illegal. Meadows testifies Trump was warned they were illegal. Defense that Trump didn't intend violence. Meadows testifies Trump was warned about violence and proceeded anyway. Defense that Trump immediately condemned violence. Meadows testifies Trump refused to condemn it for hours. There's no viable defense left that isn't directly contradicted by Meadows' first-hand testimony. So why does Meadows' cooperation matter beyond just Trump's legal jeopardy? Because it demonstrates that even Trump's most loyal insiders will eventually choose self-preservation over loyalty when facing serious prison time. That demonstration creates pressure on everyone else in Trump's network to cooperate before it's too late to get good deals. It shows that Trump loyalty doesn't protect you. It just means you'll eventually face the choice between prison and cooperating against Trump. And practically, Meadows' comprehensive testimony and documentation are giving prosecutors everything they need to prove criminal conspiracy beyond reasonable doubt. This isn't a weak case prosecutors are struggling to build. This is an overwhelming case based on testimony from the insider who saw everything and documented much of it. Alright, so let's dig into the specific evidence Meadows is providing, why the judge's order is so significant, what the cascade effects are on other Trump associates, and why this cooperation represents a fundamental turning point, because understanding the details shows why this is genuinely a legal and political earthquake. The documentary evidence that Meadows is turning over apparently includes text messages between Meadows and various Trump allies discussing plans for January 6 and for overturning the election, emails documenting coordination of the fake elector scheme, memos that Meadows wrote describing his concerns about Trump's conduct, notes from meetings where Trump gave directions about various schemes, and communications between Meadows and state officials showing pressure campaigns. This isn't just Meadows' verbal testimony, which defense attorneys might try to attack as biased or unreliable. This is contemporaneous documentary evidence created at the time events happened that corroborates what Meadows is saying. When testimony is backed by documents, it's nearly impossible to discredit. The text messages that Meadows is providing apparently include communications with members of Congress about preventing certification, communications with rally organizers about January 6, communications with Trump legal team about the fake elector scheme, and communications with Trump family members about trying to get Trump to stop the violence. Each category of messages is damaging in different ways. Messages about preventing certification show conspiracy to obstruct official proceeding. Messages about rally organization show planning and coordination. Messages about fake electors show conspiracy to commit fraud. Messages trying to get Trump to stop violence show Trump's refusal to act despite knowing people were in danger. Prosecutors will use these messages to build comprehensive timeline and to prove each element of conspiracy charges. The emails documenting fake elector coordination apparently include messages between Meadows and state-level organizers, between Meadows and lawyers advising on the scheme, and between Meadows and Trump campaign officials executing the plot. These emails show Meadows wasn't just aware of the fake elector scheme, he was coordinating it, connecting different parts of the conspiracy, ensuring state-level actions align with federal-level strategy. That central coordination role makes Meadows criminally liable as a co-conspirator, but his testimony about Trump's direction and approval of the scheme makes Trump liable as the leader of the conspiracy. The memos describing concerns about Trump's conduct that Meadows wrote are particularly valuable as evidence because they show Meadows contemporaneously documenting his worries about what Trump was doing. These memos might include descriptions of Meadows warning Trump that plans were illegal, descriptions of Meadows being uncomfortable with directions Trump was giving, descriptions of other advisors expressing concern. These contemporaneous expressions of concern prove that people around Trump knew his conduct was problematic in real time, which undermines any later claims that the conduct seemed normal or acceptable at the time. The notes from meetings where Trump gave directions are similar to John Dean's notes from Nixon White House meetings, contemporaneous documentation of president giving orders for criminal conduct. When chief of staff is taking notes during meetings, and those notes show president explicitly directing illegal schemes, that's smoking gun evidence of presidential criminal conduct. Defense attorneys will try to attack the notes' accuracy or completeness, but if Meadows can testify that he routinely took notes during meetings and that these notes accurately reflect what was discussed, the notes will be very persuasive evidence for juries. The communications with state officials showing pressure campaigns apparently include Meadows' own participation in pressuring officials to delay certification, or to find votes, or to announce investigations. Meadows wasn't just documenting Trump pressuring others. Meadows himself was an active participant in the pressure campaigns. His testimony about those activities helps prove the coordination and conspiracy, and also explains why Meadows himself faced such serious legal jeopardy that he felt compelled to cooperate. When you've personally committed crimes as part of conspiracy, cooperation is really your only option to avoid decades in prison. The judge's order compelling all documentary evidence and further testimony is significant because it makes clear the court expects comprehensive cooperation and won't tolerate Meadows holding anything back. Judges sometimes allow witnesses to claim privilege over certain materials or to limit scope of testimony, but this judge apparently is requiring Meadows to provide everything and to testify about everything relevant to the investigation. That comprehensive order shows the judge views Meadows' cooperation as essential to achieving justice and won't allow Meadows to protect Trump or himself by withholding information. The probable cause finding by the judge, based on Meadows' testimony, means the judge has concluded that evidence Meadows provided is sufficient to establish probable cause to believe Trump committed multiple crimes. Probable cause is the standard for arrest warrants and for indictments. A judge finding probable cause based on testimony means the testimony is credible and is sufficient to support criminal charges. That judicial validation of Meadows' testimony gives it additional weight beyond just one witness's word. It's one witness's word that a federal judge found credible and sufficient to establish probable cause for serious crimes. The multiple crimes for which probable cause exists apparently include conspiracy to obstruct official proceeding, preventing certification, conspiracy to defraud the United States, the fake elector scheme, incitement of insurrection or seditious conspiracy, January 6, obstruction of justice, attempting to corrupt DOJ, and pressuring Pence, and possibly other charges. Each of these carries substantial prison time. Facing multiple serious charges with strong evidence, including insider testimony, is the nightmare scenario for any defendant. Trump's lawyers understand that if Meadows testifies at trial and presents the evidence he's given prosecutors, conviction becomes very likely on at least some charges. The furious response from Trump's legal team shows they recognize how devastating Meadows' cooperation is. Trump lawyers will try to attack Meadows' credibility, claiming he's lying to reduce his own sentence, claiming he's biased against Trump, claiming his testimony is unreliable. But those attacks are difficult when testimony is corroborated by documents and by other witnesses and by Trump's own public statements and actions. Juries understand that cooperating witnesses have incentive to tell the truth because lying would eliminate any benefit from cooperation and would result in perjury charges. So while defense attorneys always attack cooperators' credibility, juries often find cooperators credible, especially when corroborated. The Democratic leader's response of immediately issuing new subpoenas shows coordinated strategy to capitalize on Meadows' revelations before Trump allies can coordinate their responses. By subpoenaing everyone Meadows implicated before those people can get their stories straight or destroy evidence, Congress prevents coordination and preservation of false narratives. Speed is essential in these situations because delay allows witnesses to coordinate and allows evidence to be destroyed. The wave of subpoenas immediately following Meadows' testimony shows Congress recognizes the opportunity and is moving aggressively to exploit it. The MAGA loyalists' response of threatening Meadows shows how Trump's movement treats perceived betrayal. In Trump's world, loyalty is absolute and betrayal is unforgivable. Meadows choosing cooperation over loyalty makes him a traitor in MAGA eyes, regardless of the legal and moral justifications for cooperation. The threats Meadows faces from MAGA supporters are real and serious: death threats, threats to his family, threats to his reputation and livelihood. But those threats also demonstrate to other potential cooperators that there are costs to flipping on Trump. Some people might be deterred from cooperation by fear of MAGA backlash. Others might be motivated to cooperate specifically to get protection from prosecution and potentially from physical threats. The transformation of Meadows into central witness in the prosecution is complete and irreversible. Once you've testified against co-conspirators and provided evidence to prosecutors, you can't untestify or take it back. Meadows is now committed to the prosecution's case, and his fate is tied to the prosecution's success. If Trump is convicted based partly on Meadows' testimony, Meadows will get credit for cooperation and reduced sentence. If Trump is somehow acquitted, Meadows gets no benefit and still faces his own potential prosecution. So Meadows has every incentive to be a strong witness and to help prosecutors build the strongest possible case. The fast escalating prosecution that Meadows' cooperation enables means Trump could face trial much sooner than he might have otherwise. Prosecutors usually need months or years to build complex conspiracy cases, interviewing witnesses, gathering documents, tracing connections, but Meadows' comprehensive cooperation shortcut that process by providing roadmap and key evidence immediately. Prosecutors can move much faster when insider cooperate hands them the case on a silver platter. Trial could potentially happen in early to mid-2026 before elections, which would be devastating timing for Trump politically. The legal jeopardy Meadows still faces, despite cooperation, reflects reality that cooperation reduces but doesn't eliminate criminal liability. Meadows committed serious crimes as part of Trump's conspiracy. Cooperation will probably reduce his sentence from decades to single digits, but he's still going to face some prison time, absent a pardon or other intervention. The judge warning that further noncompliance could trigger jail time shows that even cooperating witnesses need to cooperate fully and truthfully, or they'll lose any benefits. Meadows understands he's walking a tightrope where full cooperation reduces his sentence, but any backsliding or dishonesty could result in judge revoking cooperation deal and imposing full sentence. The personal risk from MAGA threats that Meadows faces is serious enough that he may be receiving protection from law enforcement. High-profile cooperators in major cases sometimes receive witness protection or security details because threats from defendant supporters can be credible and dangerous. Meadows has likely calculated that legal protection and reduced prison sentence are worth the social ostracism and threats he'll face from Trump world. But that calculation isn't comfortable. It's choosing between terrible options based on which is least terrible. The warning to other Trump associates that Meadows' panic represents is clear. Cooperate early before it's too late to get good deals or face prosecution without the benefit of cooperation credit. Prosecutors typically offer better deals to earlier cooperators and worse deals or no deals to later cooperators once they don't need additional testimony. Meadows cooperating creates competitive pressure on everyone else in Trump's network to cooperate quickly before they're left without options. That competitive dynamic is what prosecutors want because it cascades through criminal networks, leading to comprehensive cooperation that dismantles entire conspiracies. The new aggressive stage of House investigations that Meadows' testimony triggers includes public hearings where Meadows might testify, document releases based on what Meadows provided, criminal referrals based on what Meadows described, and potentially impeachment articles if Trump somehow hasn't left office by the time House acts. Congressional investigations will parallel criminal investigations, each reinforcing the other by developing different aspects of the evidence and by creating different types of public pressure for accountability. Okay, so let's break down what happens next now that Meadows has flipped comprehensively, what it means for Trump's trial prospects, for other potential cooperators, for Trump's political viability, and for American democracy's ability to hold former presidents accountable. Because this is a watershed moment where insider testimony might finally enable the accountability that's been elusive for years. First, and immediately, prosecutors will continue debriefing Meadows to extract every detail he can provide about Trump's conduct, about other participants in various schemes, about where additional evidence might be found, about what defenses Trump might raise and how to counter them. These debriefing sessions can take weeks or months for complex conspiracies. Prosecutors will corroborate Meadows' testimony against other evidence and other witnesses to ensure he's being truthful. They'll prepare him for cross-examination by practicing with him about how to answer defense attorneys' attacks. By the time Meadows testifies at trial, he'll be extremely well-prepared witness who can withstand aggressive cross-examination. The trial timeline acceleration that Meadows' cooperation enables means Trump could face trial on January 6, charges in early 2026, potentially with verdict before the fall elections. That timeline would be devastating for Trump politically because he'd be on trial during election season, would be convicted felon potentially before voters go to the polls, would have his crimes on display in televised trial with damning testimony from his own chief of staff. Trump's entire political strategy has relied on delaying trials past elections. Meadows' cooperation makes that delay impossible because prosecutors have everything they need to proceed immediately. For other Trump associates who participated in various schemes, Meadows' cooperation creates urgent pressure to make deals before it's too late. Prosecutors now have comprehensive testimony from Meadows about who else was involved. Those people can see what's coming. They'll be indicted based on Meadows' testimony unless they cooperate first. Some will choose to cooperate to save themselves. Others will try to fight, but fighting becomes much harder when insider has already provided detailed testimony about your participation. The rational move is to cooperate before you're indicted, because post-indictment cooperation is less valuable and gets you smaller sentence reductions. The cooperation cascade that's beginning could ultimately encompass dozens of people from Trump's network. Each new cooperator provides evidence about others who haven't yet cooperated, creating more pressure, leading to more cooperation. This is how a prosecutor dismantles organized criminal enterprises, flip someone mid-level, use them to flip people above and below them, keep working through the organization until leadership is isolated. Trump is the ultimate target at the top of the conspiracy. Everyone below him will eventually face choice of going down with Trump or cooperating against him. Trump's political viability is seriously threatened by the prospect of his own chief of staff testifying against him at trial, describing Trump's crimes. Trump has maintained political support, partly by dismissing investigations as partisan witch hunts with no real evidence. But when the evidence is testimony from Trump's own handpicked chief of staff describing Trump's crimes in detail, that narrative becomes impossible to maintain, except for the most committed cult members. Persuadable voters, moderate Republicans, independents, all will be influenced by Meadows' testimony in ways they might not be by testimony from opponents or outsiders. The 2026 electoral implications of Meadows testifying against Trump are severe. Democrats will run ads featuring clips of Meadows describing Trump's crimes. Every Republican will face questions about whether they support a candidate whose own chief of staff says he's a criminal. Republicans in competitive races will face impossible choice between defending Trump and alienating his base, or condemning Trump and alienating the MAGA voters they need. Either choice likely results in electoral losses for Republicans. The precedent about holding former presidents accountable is being established through this prosecution. If Trump is convicted based substantially on testimony from Meadows and other cooperators, it shows that even former presidents face criminal accountability when evidence of crimes is overwhelming. That precedent is crucial for rule of law and for deterring future presidential misconduct. Future presidents will understand that if they commit crimes, insiders might eventually cooperate against them, leading to prosecution and conviction. The test of whether insider testimony can overcome political tribalism is underway. Some Trump supporters will reject Meadows' testimony, regardless of how credible or well-documented it is, but others might be persuaded that Trump actually committed the crimes Meadows describes. The jury at Trump's trial will include people across political spectrum. Whether Meadows' testimony convinces them depends partly on Meadows' credibility as witness and partly on whether jurors can set aside political preferences and follow the evidence. The Supreme Court's role in this case continues to be significant. Trump will appeal any conviction, claiming various constitutional violations. The Supreme Court will ultimately decide whether Trump can be convicted based on this evidence in this trial process. The court's recent decisions rejecting Trump's immunity claims suggest they'll uphold properly obtained convictions. But the court also provides Trump's last potential escape route if he can find sympathetic justices willing to create new constitutional doctrines to protect him. The historical significance of a former president's chief of staff testifying against a former president cannot be overstated. This is unprecedented in American history. Meadows isn't just any witness. He's the person who was closest to Trump, who ran Trump's White House, who executed Trump's directives. His testimony carries unique weight because of his position and his access. Historians will study Meadows' testimony for decades as key evidence about how Trump's coup attempt was planned and executed. The Republican Party's future hinges partly on whether Trump is convicted based on Meadows' testimony. If Trump is convicted and his crimes are proven beyond doubt through insider testimony, some Republicans will finally conclude they need to move beyond Trump. Others will dig in deeper, claiming Trump was wrongfully convicted. The party will fracture between these factions. How that fracture resolves will determine whether the Republican Party can recover from Trump era or whether it remains Trump's party even after his conviction. The accountability for January 6th that Meadows' testimony enables is what victims and their families have been demanding for years. The people who were injured or killed at the Capitol, the police officers who defended it, the members of Congress who were threatened, all deserve to see those responsible held accountable. Meadows' testimony helps ensure that accountability reaches the highest levels, including Trump himself, rather than stopping with lower-level participants who are following Trump's directions. The deterrent effect if Trump is convicted based on Meadows' testimony would be powerful for future would-be authoritarians. The message would be, if you attempt a coup, your closest aides will eventually cooperate against you, you will be convicted, you will go to prison. That message should deter future presidents from attempting similar schemes because they'll understand that even with loyal subordinates, the conspiracy will eventually unravel through cooperation once the legal pressure becomes intense enough. Here's the bottom line after examining all angles. Mark Meadows is in full panic as he comprehensively cooperates against Trump, providing devastating testimony and documentary evidence about Trump's criminal conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election. The judge has ordered Meadows to provide all evidence and further testimony, finding probable cause for multiple crimes based on what Meadows has already provided. Meadows testified that he repeatedly warned Trump about potential violence and that Trump proceeded anyway, destroying Trump's potential defense about not intending January 6 violence. Congressional leaders have issued waves of new subpoenas based on Meadows' revelations, targeting everyone Meadows implicated. Legal analysts say Meadows' testimony collapses every pillar of Trump's defense. Meadows faces continued legal jeopardy and threats from MAGA supporters despite cooperation. His testimony represents turning point, enabling aggressive prosecution with insider evidence. Trump's legal team is panicking because defense becomes nearly impossible when chief of staff testifies about crimes. Other Trump associates face pressure to cooperate before it's too late. Trial could happen in early 2026 with devastating political timing. The precedent about presidential accountability is being established. What happens next depends on trial outcome, but Meadows' comprehensive cooperation gives prosecutors everything needed for conviction.